Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Molina Foundation. Is it recording? It's recording. Welcome to the Molina Foundation information session. My name is Saman, one of the co-presidents of the Osler Society. And here with me is Dr. Del Maestro, Dr. Molina, Dr. Yearl, and two of the other recipients of the Molina Scholarship. So we really hope that this is an interactive session for those of you that are here. For those that are watching on YouTube, feel free to reach out to us. So we'll be happy to address your questions. This is a really great opportunity that we have at McGill. And thanks to the generous possibility made by Dr. Molina, it's a really good experience, especially for medical students that are in their first and second year of their studies, to really take some time and to do some research in the humanities. The goal is you would have a mentor that you would work with directly and closely, and so you would be able to present your findings. More recently, we've had the members presenting their topics at the American Osler Society, so that's something that could be potentially thought about, or you'd be also presenting at McGill. We had the the student research fair very recently, where the Molina scholars and the Osler essay contest presenters had a symposium, and that's available on YouTube. You can also watch. I think it's best that each of the previous winners of the Molina Foundation Scholarship can maybe present a little bit about the work they did, what they learned, what they found valuable, and then we'll sort of end it with a Q&A session, and you're welcome to ask questions as you deem fit. So maybe I'll pass it on to Brendan Ross to maybe share some points.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of students on the call, as well as Dr. Del Maestro, Dr. Molina, and Dr. Hague-Yearl. So my name is Brendan. I'm a Med 4 at McGill, and I was I guess, the first inaugural student who participated in the Molina Scholarship and the Molina internship with the library, the Osler Library. I think that's maybe helpful for the students on the call, especially to hear about like how the process of going about finding a project, because I think sometimes maybe as medical students, we don't have a ton of time to think up a major humanities research project on our own. But I think that the Osler Library has so many wonderful resources. And even just this past week, Dr. Del Maestro reached out to me because I had done another project on a scroll in the library that Dr. Hague-Yearl had helped me find. They're buying another scroll, which could be a project for someone. So I think there's just all these resources that are world class. Like, this is one of the best libraries for the history of medicine in the world. And so if there's any topic you're interested in, even for clerkship, like if you're interested in surgery or you're interested in internal medicine, there's probably going to be humanities materials that could relate to that interest. For me, I prior to medical school, I studied Chinese and East Asian studies and history. So I was interested in that. And then coming to McGill, I was interested in Norman Bethune and his history here as a surgeon, and then traveling to China to fight or to work with the Chinese army fighting against the Japanese in World War II. So I did a project looking at the McGill materials that relate to Bethune. So they have a lot of primary sources related to Bethune, both his own writings, a lot of Chinese writings related to how they received Bethune, and then a lot of propaganda pieces. So China actually donated a lot of pieces to the Osler collection. And through that process, I was also advised by Dr. Del Maestro, which was really wonderful. So as you go through the Molina scholarship process, like you'll likely be set up with an advisor, an academic advisor, or you'll find one as you apply. But they can be really instrumental in helping you move the paper along. And so currently, I'm in final edits to hopefully get my paper published before I finish medical school. And I think Saman spoke to it a little bit, but I think it should be added, and I'll stop talking after this, but that the American Osler Society is an amazing organization. The conference that you might be able to present at if you do this project and you write a paper or make a presentation it's a really exciting conference where there's talks about every topic in medicine. It's often in exciting, fun locations. This coming year, it's in London, but it's all over the world. And I think it's a wonderful chance to meet doctors from across North America and even across the world who are doing really cool, fun things. So yeah, I had a wonderful experience. I'm happy to talk a little bit more as well. I think I'll let Ali speak to his experience, but if people have questions about the actual research process itself, I think that can really sort of depend on the project you do. So I'll let Ali speak and then open it up.
Thanks, Brandon, and thank you everyone for having me on the call. And It's great to see students interested in this exceptional award. I got involved with the Molina Scholarship in the first year of medical school. So I'm a Med 2 now. And before medical school, I was interested and still do research in neurosurgical education. So looking at technologies that can help advance surgical training. And what got me really interested in this project is the rich history of the Osler Library and also the resources available from the MNI, the Montreal Neurological Institute, in the Walter Penfield archives, the William Vernon Cohen archives, as well as the other archives at the library. So I became interested in looking at the past and trying to discern what were some effective educational modalities that were used effectively at the MNI. And for that, I collaborated with Dr. Del Maestro as well as Dr. Thomas Schlick from the faculty of, from the Department of Social Studies of Medicine. And through this award, I had a great opportunity in the summer to actually go to the archives and work with note cards, papers, instructional material that neurosurgeons like Dr. Penfield and Dr. Cohen actually used to teach students at the time. And through this experience, I gained a better appreciation of what makes education really, or innovation really stick. And one of the great things that came out of this was just learning from everyone else involved and learning from the experience of my supervisors, but also from the support of the Osler Library, and especially Mary, who was super helpful in helping me find the resources needed for this project. And I'm really excited because my abstract for the American Osler Society was accepted, and I'm really looking forward to going to London and presenting this with the American Osler Society and expanding this network and really sharing the great work that is in the archives of our school. So for those of you who are really interested in maybe expanding your training outside of just the medical curriculum, this is a wonderful opportunity. And I can really tell you there are few chances you can get to do research that is purely like medical related, but it's related to the rich history that has shaped how medicine is taught, practiced, and continues to change in the future. So I really recommend you to look into this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about like how the application process goes or how your work may look like. But as Brendan also alluded to it, it really depends on your specific project and the mentors you choose to work with. So I think I'll pause there, and I'll be happy to chime in at any point in the future as well. Open it for someone.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Brendan. So Ali and Brendan were the respective winners. I was also one of the Molina scholars. So I'm a visual person. It's a visual project. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and just please nod your head if you see it. I worked on Leonardo's medical library, Mining the Secrets of Genius and Creativity, with Dr. Del Maestro as my mentor. This is a very, very wonderful project because I am interested in intellectual history, and also Leonardo is a very enigmatic and fascinating subject. And Dr. Del Maestro is Italian, so that certainly helps with some of the text and material. And the fact that, you can really go to the Osler Library. In fact, I did go to the Osler Library. Dr. Yearl helped me to identify works in his library. So it's sort of a meta book, a book on book. So library on library, to see what sort of sources that he used. I learned a lot. I read a lot of literature. The nice thing with doing humanities research is that if you identify a certain niche and you can emphasize and dig deeper, you can make original contributions very easily. Well, easily, and you need to put time and effort and engagement, but in the sense that it is a valued contribution that you can keep and have for the rest of your life. And because of the fact that this is a possibility, we looked at volumes relating to his interest in medicine and some dietary and other material that were available to see how he thought. Now, the other benefit of doing this kind of project, and we do have a reflective piece, all three of us, and other previous winners in the Osler Library newsletter that I think Dr. Yearl recently shared on the website. We'll share the link with you too later on so you can access and read that. Is that you get to learn a lot about a particular topic, and the fact that the McGill Library can connect you to someone who's an expert, and it makes it so much easier because you have a mentor that you can work with closely, that you can receive regular updates and you can get guidance from. I, for example, had questions about a book that was published in Italian by Carlo Vecchi, which Dr. Del Maestro knew. I reached out to Carlo Vecchi, I got information. I translated the book from Italian to English, which was certainly very helpful for the bibliography of the material that I was used. And I was very excited to, like Ali, I actually applied to the American Osler Society's abstract and it was accepted. But because I'm in my surgical rotation third year, I'll be attending the conference hopefully next year in 2024. So this is a really good way to connect with, of course, as Brendan alluded to, physicians with this long-standing history of medicine and history of medicine, like Dr. Del Maestro, Dr. Molina, and also with other medical students in other institutions in the States and other places, and building alliances. So it's a very nice, very pleasant experience, and it's something that can really benefit you, and it is not available in any other institution, at least in Canada, to my knowledge. So this is something that you can really capitalize on and benefit from. So I'm just going to stop that so that the visual components are there. I think I can open the floor to Dr. Molina and Dr. Del Maestro to also share some thoughts and ideas, and then to questions afterwards.
So William Osler died in 1919, and he gave his library to McGill, to the medical school. And it was a number of years before it was cataloged, but once it was sent to McGill. And you now have this wonderful resource. It's one of the best historical collections in the world, one of the most important collections of books and materials on the history of science and medicine ever collected. And in the 100 years since that time, it's been added to. So it's full of rich material. You heard about some of the primary source material, like the Bethune material, like the neurological material. There's just great stuff there. So why should you do this? Well, one of the things Saman talked about is you can make a contribution, and it's something that you can have with you for the rest of your life. My mentor, when he was in medical school, did a paper on the plague in San Francisco. We don't normally think of plague in San Francisco, but there was an outbreak of plague, and he wrote about that. So I think it's good, to kind of round you out. I've always been interested in how do we know what we know? And that's one of the things that history tells us. We've had some great papers presented, and as you've heard, some of them have been accepted for presentation at the American Osler Society meeting. It's a great opportunity for you to go and meet other people who have similar interests. And I really did this because of what Rolando and Pam Del Maestro did. They were the pioneers in all of this, and so I've kind of followed in their footsteps to help promote this. In addition to having a wonderful library, you have a great resource in Mary. She will find anything you need for you and help you. She's been really good to researchers about finding materials for them, digging things out of the archives, digging things out of the collection that you might not know about, but might be useful to you in your research. And that's a wonderful thing too. So I would really encourage you, if you have any interest at all, to think about applying and following up on this.
Maybe I can add just a couple of comments. When I did a PhD in Sweden while I was doing my residency in neurosurgery, and I had not had the opportunity previously to have really anything to do with the humanities or anything to do with those types of activities. And while doing this work in Sweden, I was able to come in contact with a number of individuals who indeed had a substantial interest in the humanities and the importance of the humanities. The Saman Library, for example, is also a very impressive library in Europe associated with the history of medicine. And it sort of opens your eyes in a completely new way. One of the things about your medical school is that, many of the things that you're learning now will not be that terribly important in the years to come because medicine will evolve. Many of the activities that I did when I was a medical student, a resident, and even a physician and a neurosurgeon, people don't do anymore. We just move by that, and new things happen all the time. And one of the things to sort of try to understand is how does this process occur? How do we go from starting a particular sort of idea? How does that idea get turned into sort of reality and actually works and helps patients or doesn't help patients? And can we learn from those processes? And my feeling is you can. You learn from those processes and you actually become more, let's say, critical of what's happening. You think a little bit more about it. You're not as easily swayed by data. You want to sort of look into the data, and that is all a process that helps you. And to have mentors that actually, are involved in helping you distill what data is and distill what words are and what articles are, and to try to understand what the author is really trying to say is something that you won't get very often. It won't happen very often during your medical school career. It will not happen that often in your residency because you'll be pretty busy. It will begin to happen maybe later on as you have other interests. But the other thing I really believe is that you should have other interests besides medicine. There is no question about that. Believe it or not, there will come a day when you're no longer seeing patients for all kinds of reasons. You may retire, you may decide to do something else, who knows? And therefore, to have other interests really fulfills your life, makes your life a little bit better. And, if you look around, I have a large library here. That's one of my interests. And Dr. Molina has a large library also. That's one of his interests. And, that's part of it, learning new things, looking at new things, and exploring new ideas and new concepts, and trying to find the essence of why things have happened and how we can make in a little way a better understanding of how medicine actually works. So I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I wish I had been present when I was going through it, because if I would have been involved in it much earlier, and hopefully would have actually been able to do more things than I was able to do associated with the history of medicine. And I'll only make one other comment. Dr. Osler provided about 8,000 books to the library, and these are critical books, obviously in the core of the collection. But the Osler Library now has 80 to 90,000 books, and has lots of other information related to Penfield, related to all kinds of individuals who have been at McGill and other people who donated their works. Cushing, for example, donated all letters he had received about Osler when he was writing his thesis on, or his book on Solar Osler to the Osler Library. So again, it has all these sort of real unique things that other places don't have. So all I can say is think about it, think seriously about it, look at the information, and see if there's something, and I'm sure Mary is the critical person here, see if there's something you're really interested in. And if you are, why? And we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Maybe we can open the floor to questions, or maybe Dr. Yearl, would you like to add anything as well to the discussion?
I think in terms of, obviously we're here for everyone, and we'll help you as far as we can. I can't promise to do magic, but we can usually find something. Our strength definitely is probably up to, in terms of books, up to about 1920, but we have a lot of, in terms of Canadian literature, we have a lot of things from the 20th century. So the archives that we have of the Penfield collection, we have, Siegel. So we have things on, the development of research in sort of cardiology and neurology and things like that in our archives. But we also have, say, wartime letters from some nurses who were working in World War I, and materials like that are coming in. We also have access to certain databases that we can help you find. If there's material we don't have, we're also here to facilitate that. So I think, just because we don't have something here, even though we have a lot, doesn't mean that this isn't for you. So I think I want to emphasize that. In terms of collections, Dr. Del Maestro mentioned the Cushing collection of letters that Cushing used when writing the biography. We've actually just finished having those digitized, and pretty soon those are all going to be linked in. And so even though generally, I advise you definitely should come in and see the originals. It does mean that sometimes when you want to look back at something, if we have it digitized, then you have that resource. You do see things differently when you see the physical copy, especially with books. You'll see markings of previous owners, and this whole realize that the book is more than just the text. So definitely come and see the material. Also, Dr. Molina was mentioning like the plague in San Francisco. Well, we have a lot of things both that Osler collected, but also people have collected since on things like, epidemics in Montreal or in Quebec that you might not think of anymore. Cholera epidemics, smallpox epidemics, tuberculosis is such a tremendous problem. And so, if you want to look back, for instance, at how pandemics in the past have been handled locally, that's another thing. So we're a global history of medicine library in terms of what we have and the strength that we have. We have books from the foundational books of the scientific revolution too, which we have Vesalius and Copernicus, by the way, are celebrating the 550th anniversary of their publication of this year. But we also have, Newton, Galileo, Tycho Brahe. And I think it's part of this admission that you're not going to have these tremendous changes and advances in medicine without this bigger change in the global way of looking at the natural world. So we do have materials that you might not think of as medical, and you might be surprised that they're there. And I think it's worth considering, if Osler chose everything for his library, to think, what did he think was important for the medical community to have access, for medical students especially to see as part of their formation? Why did he choose those things? And it's part of our examining Osler as well, because we know that there's certain books that he had that he didn't think were worthy of his library, and he didn't include them. So that's another aspect you can look at. And I think in terms of other things you might not think of that I'll just mention is that we have been, we're currently in the process of cataloging a whole new addition to our Canadian, mostly gray literature on HIV and AIDS. And what this means is this is literature that doesn't really appear in medical journals. This is literature that's been created by communities for themselves. And so again, if you want to look a little bit more outside of what you're doing, but find a topic maybe that's relevant to your situation in Canada, for instance, we have Indigenous communities creating information that's for themselves, that's maybe speaking to their own needs, or maybe you'll have LGBTQ2S plus communities, or different factions, sort of groups within, and also things like caregivers. And so just to say that, and I think the other thing I would advise is, I think sometimes people really want to look at something that has to do with the history of the specialty they want to go into. And I think that's a very good way of choosing a topic and knowing that you're going to be interested in it. But I would also encourage you to look beyond that and really just think about something that's going to be so very different that it might open your eyes to a new way of thinking. You could look at literature that is in our library, for instance. Why did Osler think that it was important to collect certain literary author? He has a whole section of the library devoted to literature. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, but just to say, and we do have a lot of letters and archives and also artifacts that people can look at.
Thank you, Dr. Yearl. So maybe we can open the floor to some of you that are here, which is great to maybe ask some questions, things that you're interested in, or comments. Be happy to entertain them.
Maybe I can get it going. James, why are you here? Why are you interested in this particular session, and why are you taking time to be here?
Oh, hello. I kind of just saw this event on Facebook. Sorry, I'm kind of whispering because I'm at the library right now. So I just saw this event on Facebook, and I thought that it would be interesting just to get to know a bit more about it. At first, I wasn't even aware that it was like a humanities research project, but after hearing you guys talk about it, I found it like very, very interesting. Like it's a bit different from like the clinical and science aspect of medicine. So yeah, I'm kind of just looking around to see if it would be but I think I'm interested in applying. I'm thinking either this year or next year, but something that that's on my mind.
Jasmine, your thoughts?
Hello, sorry. My video is off because I just came home from the hospital right when the call started, so I had to eat my dinner quickly. But yeah, I'm sort of in a similar boat. I recently went to one of the Osler events that was held at the library, and I found like what the group did really interesting. And then I saw this event advertised on Facebook, and I've done a lot of research in my time, but it's always been, I did a bachelor's in immunology, so it was very like molecular, it was very biochemistry, it was very kind of like very, very, I don't know, a little scientific, I guess you can say, but I saw that this was a humanities-based research project, so I just wanted to kind of understand more about what humanities-based research sounds like, kind of what you could do, especially at the intersection of medicine. So yeah, and yeah, I definitely am interested. I'm in the boat where I'm a med 2 as well, so just regarding Lily's question in the chat, that is a question that I guess perfect. So it sounds like we are eligible. So just understanding like what our 4 weeks off versus the 8-week timeline of the award would be is kind of the main question I would have for pursuing an award like this. But beyond that, yeah, I think I would definitely be interested into looking into this further.
Maybe I can help a little bit with this issue of the 4 weeks related to the couple of months time periods. I think, and Ali will be an example of this too, and Saman also. I think the basic idea is you get most of the, groundwork and ideas put together during that time period. But then there is the expectation that you continue to work on the project, during the next sort of time period, which is of course the September to sort of December time period, and also after that, depending on how the information comes in and what types of information is available. And so it's a sort of a continuous sort of thing. And Ali, maybe you can talk about that too.
Yeah, there's certainly some flexibility that goes into conducting the project. For example, in my case, I started looking into source material earlier than when my summer break started. So I began doing my research in mid-April to close to mid-June, and then I had my exams, and then I started again in June. But it's really dependent up to you and what you discuss with your mentors, and how you plan your visits to the library if you need to be in person to look at the material in person, which is something that I highly recommend you doing, coordinating that, of course, with the library. But there is some flexibility. So although I know that in Med 2 we get 4 weeks off, it's up to you how concentrated you want to make your efforts to do that big chunk of your research during those 4 weeks, or start kind of like a little bit more spread out from as early as you can to start accumulating the resources and the material you need to start putting together your project. And for sure, my project is still ongoing. So although I've certainly passed that 8-week period, it's I think there is a nice expectation that yes, like it's really, really hard to start and finish something exactly at 8 weeks, and giving it the time that it needs, it does take the time that it needs to really develop and mature into a well-rounded project. So there is definitely flexibility in that. And over the summer, I was actually involved in 2 other projects as well. And the visits to the Osler Library were the ones that I really looked forward to, because it just gave me a break to to look at science through a different perspective. Yeah.
It was a similar
Henry?
experience for me for, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Saman.
Also did it in my second year. I think it's important to know that the projects are developing and ongoing, and maybe we forgot to mention this, but all the recipients also work on a peer-reviewed publication with their mentor. So it's not just something that you would present and attend a conference, you would also have a publication from it too. And that's a development, right? So I mean, I'm working with Dr. Maestro on a draft for one manuscript, and then I'm thinking it can be actually 2 papers instead of 1 because you can sort of shift the topic. So it's an ongoing aspect, and Brendan himself, he's been really working on this longitudinally, as he said. So, and I was in a very busy, I was in internal medicine when the presentation was, and this is, you know, probably my biggest rotation so far, even more than surgery, and I managed it okay. And I did research during that time period as well. So as long as, you know, you have a supportive mentor and someone that you can talk with, the library is very flexible, and you can undertake the task. And you can also reach out to us for questions.
Brendan, you've had a long process too associated with this.
Yeah, I think for me, I think especially just I can speak to kind of the flexibility of the library, because a lot of my materials, I can actually, if I can share my screen, I'll just show, I realized I also had my presentation just to show at least a little bit of what the materials of the Bethune collection look like. So let's see if I can pull this up. View slideshow. Okay, sorry, I'm just jumping into this. Can people see my screen? Okay, so I'll just quickly, as I'm talking, just look through some pictures, but a lot of these materials were in person at the library, and they were in the process of being digitized. And my award happened the summer of, like, COVID had occurred. So the library was shut down, everything was shut down. Our medical school curriculum was on hold for a period of time. And I was actually able to work with Mary and some other people at the library to go in and see some of the materials once things started to open up. It was done under, you know, the proper quarantine protocols and everything, but just to say, like, the library was incredibly helpful, and people coming and working so I could find the materials at the right time. So this booklet is actually in the collection. Some of these photos, these posters are also, this book is also in the collection at McGill. So just to say that I think the library can work with you, and if like you're on certain heavy rotations, you could maybe move the work back a little later. And then I think also in terms of publishing, oftentimes, like, the publishing process is everyone knows it can take a long time. So you might actually it's nice where I think you can you don't have to have a published piece to present at the AOS. So you can kind of have a solid draft, like a full draft, and then submit that draft to or just submit a short, like, a proposal to the AOS. You can get accepted for the conference. You can present your work at the conference, and then over, you know, third year, I was really getting this polished for publication, and I submitted to a major journal, and then they accepted it. Now I'm just sort of fine tuning the edits. So that process takes time, but I think that the Molina Foundation scholarship kind of launched it. So it kind of gave it, like, the momentum for it to kind of continue to work, and then it's hopefully very, very soon coming to fruition. But I think that it's rare to kind of have this opportunity where you get this much support to do something in the middle of medical school. So anyway, those are a couple images that might help fill out the picture of one of the projects. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Yoel, you were involved in the essay contests, and also were about to go to London, but unfortunately that didn't occur because of time and some of the other issues associated with the London meeting. So maybe you can give us your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. So as Dr. Del Maestro just mentioned, I participated last year in the Osler essay contest, which was the other competition that they put forward. And so that was a very fulfilling experience. In my reflection, I also talked a bit about how I enjoyed the opportunity to jump back into the humanities and do research in that discipline once again. So I'm hoping that this Molina Foundation scholarship could be another opportunity to get back into that and be a next step in that regard. In terms of a topic that I'm interested in, I haven't thought of one just yet, so I'm hoping to explore the resources in the Osler Library. Last year, when I was participating in the other essay contest, I went into it thinking that I would do something related to the classics, like ancient Greece, and then I ended up doing something in the Renaissance era instead, right? So it was a complete shift of topic. So I'm really not going into this with any expectations. I'll want to explore the resources that the library has to offer.
Amrit, your thoughts? Why are you here?
Can you see? Sorry. Oh, 1 second. Sorry. So first of all, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for your time and for this info session. I've always wanted to be I've always wanted to know more about the Osler Society, and this info session was really helpful. And I have experience in research more in the clinical area. So having a project in the more in the humanities area is very intriguing. And of course, it's a very big privilege to be able to use the resources in the Osler Library. So it is something that I'm really interested about. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Lily is the one of the co-presidents of the McGill Medical Student Osler Society, along with Saman. So, Lily.
Hi. So I wanted to say, like, once again, thank you to Saman, Brendan, and Ali for sharing. As always, your talks are so informative and capturing. And I also, as Yoel was saying, he did the essay contest this year, but I did the essay contest 2 years ago now. And I had a nice break from doing any research in history of medicine. But now I think after hearing everyone's talks and presentations over the last year, I'm interested in getting back into it. But I feel like this scholarship particularly seems like it's a lot more of a longitudinal project than the Osler essay was. So I feel like for me, I'm just trying to wrap my head around trying to find a topic that interests me, because I don't want to be I think just in general, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would interest me in doing long-term research in, and I want to be sure that whatever I choose is something that I'm really passionate about. So that's something that I've been thinking about throughout this whole presentation.
Lily, what was your topic?
For the Osler essay, I did it on the 1934 hospital strike in Montreal.
So I don't know if you guys know about this, but it was a fascinating and kind of an ugly chapter in Montreal history. And one of the things I liked about that was that Lily wasn't afraid to confront something that was not a pleasant historical event. And she kind of looked it in the eye and presented it to us. And it was really a good piece. So there's lots of things you can do. Lots and lots of things you can do. And it becomes, I think, as Brendan was saying, almost like a hobby. Once you get started, you want to work on it maybe in the weekend when you have a little free time, or in the evenings, and you do a lot of reading. And I think it is an eye-opening experience. It will give you a different perspective on medicine and life.
Yeah, I was actually just texting Amrit about it, and he was asking about the Osler essay contest, and I was saying the research that I was doing was actually fun. I felt like I was doing some side hobby, not having to do with anything in medical school. And I want to be able to find a topic that I'm just as passionate about if I apply for this scholarship.
And it's a big thanks to Lily too for showing me this opportunity as well, because again, just like Lily said, it's a different take than the more clinical side of things, and it's just very interesting. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what kind of projects are I can that are basically what projects are available or what I can find using the resources of the Osler Library.
If I can just jump in too, I think obviously feel free to come talk and we can sort of do a brainstorming session. But also you don't have to have, it doesn't have to be just right. You know, when you do your proposal, it's an idea, and it's idea that you've done enough research about to show that you have some sense of where it might go and some sense of what your resources might be. But it's okay if it changes over time. I mean, because this is what happens in the normal case of research is you go in with a certain idea, a set of questions, and of course this can happen in a lab as well. And then maybe as you get into it, you start thinking, wait a minute, maybe there's something else going on here, and that's okay. So I think I wouldn't stress too much about making sure that you get the perfect topic for your proposal, because part of the process is to keep an open mind. And maybe, you know, actually, I think this happened to Yoel in the course of your research for the essay contest, that, you know, there was the going in there, but, you know, just not to be scared that it's, you know, it's okay if you shift things a little bit, you know, it's, you want some direction, but it doesn't have to be too prescriptive.
Another approach is to pick an object. Like Brandon was talking about, a scroll. We recently found a scroll at the Huntington Library that was an Asian scroll, I think it's Japanese, on the history of gold mining. And no one had ever done anything with it. And it's been sitting there on the shelf for years and years and years. There are all kinds of things, an interesting old book or a scroll or a manuscript or even a broadside that no one's looked at or researched or wondered about, what does this mean? Where does it fit in? Or maybe a translation that hasn't been done. So there's all kinds of things you can do without having a project in mind necessarily, but just going to the library and finding an interesting object to study.
Yeah, and we do, I also meant to add, because almost everything of ours is cataloged, but also if you're interested in an area that we haven't mentioned, I mean, our strength is definitely European, but for instance, we're soon, we hope, going to be embarking on a bigger project that's going to help with the conservation, digitization, and cataloging of our Sinhalese olas. No one has ever looked at those before. I think they've been sitting on our shelves. And again, that's something where someone could potentially look at something like that. Or we have a box of Sanskrit material, which again, I don't think it's properly cataloged. But, you know, we've recently digitized all of our Middle Eastern languages materials. We're currently digitizing our East Asian languages materials. So those are things that haven't really been used before. But equally, you can pick up a book that you think is amazing and find something in it. Like we have Osler's, the first edition of his textbook, bound, you know, with interleaved paper, you know, it's so you can see his notes for the second edition. And we have, that's not the only case of something like that, where you can see the process of, say, how someone gets from A to B. And so I think that's building on that idea of an object, that you don't have to know necessarily where you're going, but you can say, I'm really interested in this book, this artifact, this something else, and then you can learn more about it.
The problem you may have, though, is you may end up like Dr. Molina and myself, that years and years later, you're still working on certain projects that you started or have evolved into other projects. So it is a sort of, it can be somewhat of a lifelong sort of fun thing to be involved with. I think both of us have had quite a bit of fun related to some of the things that we've been doing over our lifetimes associated with humanities types of objects and things to think about.
Jasmine, you have a question?
Yes, and sorry, I'm on my phone. So hi. So I just have a quick question. It's kind of a two-part question. So I guess the first part is I'm wondering, I think you were mentioning that we have all these sort of uncatalogued things potentially, and there's Sanskrit material, etc. Where would we be, like, would there be a list of things we'd be able to find, even if they are uncatalogued, to be able to see like what items are in the library? And I guess the second part of my question is, if we look into any of these items that are in different languages, would there be like some sort of help we could have if we wanted to, in addition to just looking at the history of the actual object, also diving into the text itself? I don't know. Yeah.
That's a really good question. First of all, I'll say almost everything of ours is cataloged. So the vast majority of things are. So I think how you'll find something that isn't is if you come to me, say with an interest, I might happen to know that there's that object or that thing over there. So definitely, if you're not finding what you want to find, ask us, and then we'll think about it. In terms of, we can't offer translation help, and sometimes I think a mentor might be able to give a little bit of guidance, but I would say no one's going to be doing the translation for you. And so that is certainly an important thing to know, just because translation itself takes, you can have a translation of a book that can take years and years. I mean, that can be its own project that goes on for a long time, but someone can probably help you with a little bit of the content.
Just
Perfect. Thank you.
just to follow up on that, I think, so one project I did at the Osler Library, I don't speak Japanese, but I was interested in this Japanese scroll, which was part illustrations of a dissection and then a lot of text. And I found a professor at McGill through the help of the Osler Library who could help me understand some of the context of the scroll, like just key sort of facts around it and some of the translating pieces of it. But I chose an object that was an art history project, right? Like it was very visual. And so I could write my paper around like the images and then use other secondary sources that were in English that were commenting on that period of time in Japan. So if there's, for example, some Middle Eastern piece or Indian piece or other, any piece that's not English that has like some other illustrations or images that are interpretable, like you can use those, and then you can look at other English sources around that to try to fill in information, which I found really fun. So that's another way to do that.
Yeah, actually, I'll jump in on that. Say some more of the Japanese material we've recently gotten, like a particular book I'm thinking of, but also a French midwife book. They all are clearly getting their illustrations from their late 18th century books. They're clearly getting their illustrations from a giant sort of more mainstream medical book that was published in England in the mid 18th century also. So it's interesting to see how, even if you don't understand the language, if you're looking at that art history context, sometimes you can still see the communication, intellectual communication in the medical world in a certain period of time.
There's also other resources too. I came to the library, I used Google Pixel, and I was able to translate a lot of stuff from Latin to English. And there's also other applications like deep learning, where if you can find the source, and I have found the source, and you find the PDF related to that, it can translate as if you were a scholar in it. And I've used it, and it works really well. So there's ways around that, of course, in addition to ways that Brendan suggested. So there's a way.
Thank you.
I guess the only remaining thing is maybe if Dr. Yearl, you could specify the deadline, the timeline with things too, for people that will be watching it later on, so that they have an idea as well. That'd be great.
I believe we said the deadline was the 24th of February this year.
Yes. Okay.
Correct
perfect.
me if I got that off. And normally it's a proposal of what you think you're going to look at, your basic topic, a narrative of, it doesn't have to be a long narrative, maybe a page or two total that also includes, what you think you're going to do, how you think you're going to do it. So some of the resources, if they're particular items themselves, books, artifacts, archival collections, or even, I think I'm going to be mining this database for these resources. Or again, it could be your particular, we have, things like medical arguments that took place in the past as well. You sometimes have pamphlet wars. But really just to think about what kind of sources you'll use. And then if you do know of a mentor or someone like that, something like that, then to include that information. But get as much in as you can, just to show that you've thought about it enough and done enough work that you think you have something that's viable. That's really what we're looking for. And obviously the more you can do, but it's important to get something in. Don't, stress so much that it's not perfect that you don't do it.
Great.
On that note, I would just reinforce that point. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
It's a great note to end on, so I have nothing to add.
Thanks everybody for
Thank you, everyone.
session today. If you have any other questions, I'm sure that Dr. Molina, myself, Mary, and Saman and Lily, et cetera, and all the rest of the individuals on it would be more than happy to help you. No question whatsoever. Bye-bye, everyone.